Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. I thought today it might be fun to talk about my top 5 wedding tips for any brides out there getting ready to get married. I got engaged in 2013. I was engaged all of 2014, and then I got married in 2015. And first and foremost, weddings are such a personal thing. Some people like small weddings, some people like destination weddings, some people love like humongous weddings, and to each his own. It really is about that union with you and your partner, and whether or not you want to share that with people, with 100 people, with 300 people, or with just you and your significant other. It's totally up to you. These are just the tips that I kind of found helped me not only throughout the wedding planning process, but also when I look back, I think like, oh, this is what I would tell my kid, like when my kid is getting ready to get married, this would be like my little bit of advice. Or, if a friend were getting married, this would be sort of like my, not 2 cents, but, something I could contribute. So yeah, I mean, take everything with a grain of salt. This is totally my opinion, but I do hope that it helps. So my first wedding tip is don't sweat the small stuff. And I know that sounds so cliche and so common, but it's so true. And I think that is what got me through my entire engagement, is not sweating the small stuff. Like, you can't get the flowers you can't get the flowers you want, not a big deal. You can't, the font on the invitation, isn't perfect, that's okay. You have to kind of put things into perspective, because as things start piling up, as, more and more vendors get added to the list, things are going to be and feel overwhelming and a little bit crazy. So I tried really hard to put things in perspective and to just not get worked up and too anxious about certain things. So if it's something that is not within your control, if you go online and there's this, accessory piece that you've been eyeing for months and months and months, and then all of a sudden they discontinue it and they're all sold out of this accessory and you can't get it, try as much as possible to let it go. Because it'll only eat at you and eat away at you, and it's not worth it. Everything that happens on your wedding day is perfect and is exactly what it was meant to happen and meant to be. And so, yeah, I think my biggest advice would just be get through, don't sweat it. Don't sweat it, get through it. It's, it's all gonna wrap into one. It's all gonna be this wonderful experience and life experience that you get to neatly tie up with a bow and put in your heart and save forever. So, I mean, and I feel like I can definitely say that because the night before my wedding, and I can go, if you guys want to hear this story in full and get my full wedding day story, I can definitely do a separate video on that. But the day before my wedding, I actually found out that I wasn't going to be, there was a huge storm in the city the night before, and it was gonna go into the next day, and so I ended up having to do my own hair and makeup the day of my wedding. And luckily, I have a lot of products, but I feel like that is an instance where you find out less than 24 hours in advance that you are going to have to do your own hair and makeup, that you will not have a hair and makeup person, and that could literally turn some brides into crazy people. I did have a breakdown moment for sure, and I think honoring your feelings is important. I did cry, I called my mom, I was freaking out. But I kind of let the emotion out. For me it was that was I want to say the night before my wedding, that was my biggest issue. That's a pretty big issue to have. But I cried, I let it out, let it go, and then moved on. And now looking back at my wedding, it was perfect. It was exactly as it was meant to be. My second wedding tip would be don't regret anything that happens the day up. So that kind of goes straight, ties into my last tip, into my story about my hair and makeup. You can't regret anything that happens and doesn't happen. Your wedding day is so, it's such a funny thing. You spend so long. Well, some people spend so long, and I spent a year or so kind of planning, and you spend so long, at least I spent so long, planning the wedding, and then the day of, it really is out of your hands. It's out of your control. And because like it's was such an out of body experience, because you really realize like, oh my gosh, today's the day. This is the day I've been dreaming about my whole life. My friends and family are here. There's so much of that happening and so many feelings happening that like you don't even have the opportunity to like think about place cards or setups or this or that. And so yeah, I do know like of one or two things that happened that I was like, oh, that's not the way it was supposed to go. But you can't regret that things didn't happen exactly the way that they needed to, because at the end of the day, the most important part is getting married and being with the person you love, and whether or not you want to share that with other people, like being with those people. So I just, everything on the wedding day, let go, just be in love. My third tip is find a budget and stick with it. I think this is a really big one, especially nowadays where there's Pinterest and there's all these magazines and there's all these beautiful things, and so many vendors nowadays have so many different tiers. There's like the silver package, the gold package, the platinum, the diamond package, like all these packages that, you can sort of get sucked into, and it's really, really tricky. So what really worked for my husband and I was sitting down right at the beginning of our engagement and figuring out what our budget was. Now, everyone's budget is going to be completely different. Some people pay for their own wedding themselves, which is amazing. Some people get help from their parents, which is amazing. Everyone's budget is going to be different, and it doesn't matter what your budget is. My advice is just stick with it and nail it down at the beginning. You can always, like, if you're blessed or lucky enough to, like, get a gift of, like, some money in the middle of your planning process, or your parents decide, like, oh, well, here's some more money for your wedding, or, you get an awesome bonus at work or something, that's great. But I always like to budget under a little bit, because then any sort of extra money you get, you can either save or then purchase something that maybe you couldn't afford before. But I would definitely recommend under budgeting than over budgeting, because I feel like it's very common for couples to like set a budget and then start spending over it, or like set a really high budget but not actually have that money like concretely. And I guess that's important as well, is actually having that money that you budget for. And like knowing that like that money is for the wedding, it's for nothing else, and like really being able to set that money aside just for the wedding. So that you don't get yourself into trouble. You don't want to get yourself into like too much debt. I mean, you don't want to get yourself into debt at all, but you don't want to get yourself into too much debt, because you don't want to be like a married couple who like then owes $200,000 because their wedding, So just be smart. And you can really nowadays, what's so amazing about like the internet, I sound like a grandma, but what's so amazing about the internet is that you can find so many things online for cheaper than you would pay for them like in store. Or there's DIY, which leads me to my next tip, DIY within reason. I originally, like, I'm crafty, but I'm not like super crafty. And at first I was like, you know what, I'm gonna DIY so much. And I guess because, I mean, we had a healthy budget, but it wasn't, like, we also got married in Manhattan, so everything's gonna be overpriced. So in an effort to stay within budget, I thought, anything that I can do on my own, I'm going to do on my own, which for the most part worked out well. But I do want to say, make sure that whatever it is, because originally I thought like, oh, I'll DIY the invitations. Now, some people can do that because they're so gifted, have the patience and the time. I pretty well have none of those things. So the invitations, even though I at first had the intention to DIY them, I realized pretty quickly that that was not going to happen, and that I could DIY other things. We actually ended up DIYing our gifts, like the little gift favor, like guest favors. and our centerpieces and like other decorations and like we did a lot of decorative DIYs, which I thought was great. But I ended up, deciding against DIYing the invitations because, especially if you're gonna have over 100 people, it's a lot. It's definitely a lot. And again, nowadays there's so many websites online where you can, it used to be like wedding invitations would cost thousands of dollars because you could only get them done by like a professional invitation guy. And now you can go on Wedding Paper Divas or other like wedding paper sites, and it's not terribly expensive. So that would be my fourth tip. My last and final tip would be spend time with family and friends. Make sure that you spend the time with your guests on the day of your wedding. And that includes like finding time to spend with your husband or wife or spouse. It's tricky if you're going to have like 500 people at your wedding. I understand that then spending time with every single person is going to be hard. But when I think back to my wedding day, that's what I cherish. Like, those are the memories I cherish the most, is getting to spend the time with some family members. I actually did get the chance to like see and talk to everybody, but getting the time also to spend time, can I say time one more time? Getting to spend the time with some family members who either like live far away or who I haven't seen in a long time. And, I know this is tricky because everyone's weddings flow differently, and it can be hard to see and talk to everybody. But I don't know, I guess that, in my opinion, it was really beautiful to get to see and chat, even just for a second, with mostly everyone. And when I look back on my wedding day, that's what I like really cherish the most, is like, oh, I really did get to even just say hi to every single person, which I thought was really special. And that does include your spouse. So there were a few times where my spouse and I were able to kind of just step back and like watch everything happen, which I think is important too, because, that's what the day's really about, is about you and your spouse, and about that love you guys are now sharing together. And so it's important to like be with that person. And it's hard because you guys are getting pulled in opposite directions and like there's a million things to do. But yeah, we were able to kind of take a step back and watch our family and friends dancing and having fun and talking with each other, and that was really special as well. So maybe that was like my sixth advice, but I'm going to roll it in with my fifth. I hope you all have a wonderful day. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll talk to you guys real soon. Bye.